My name is Caprice James. Thank you all for joining Building the Right Board session. If you have not had an opportunity, please go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat. You can, if you're in the Whova app, you can introduce yourselves in the chat. If you're not in the Whova app and in Zoom, we actually will take a time and be able to highlight those of you that have joined us. I do see some folks that are not from Southern Maryland here with us just from looking at the group. So a little bit about who I am. So I'm Caprice James. I'm a Marine spouse, an active duty Marine spouse for the last 15 years. Me and my husband are currently stationed here in Southern Maryland, and he is stationed at the Pentagon. I am the founder of Stellus Girls. I also am the co-founder of Military Heart Matters. And then I have been a founder of a few other international organizations. I don't have any children, so I call myself the best auntie. I am the owner of DKJ Global Consulting, where I help nonprofits and small businesses start, do some strategy planning, some information and training around board development. I am a board of director. I do sit on a couple of boards here in Southern Maryland. I love scuba diving. When we were stationed in Okinawa, Japan, I got my certification in scuba diving, so I love to dive. It's kind of hard to do here in Southern Maryland. The Chesapeake Bay isn't that quite interesting, so I haven't had the opportunity to do that. I do consider myself a servant leader. I not only love leading in organizations, but I also like to make sure that I'm serving in my local community. International leader. For my nonprofit Stellus Girls, we actually run programs across 7 different countries, and I have been running programs internationally with young people for the last 8 years. I am now a best-selling author with many authors here in the Southern Maryland community. Our book is The Nonprofit Legacy, and so we really do a deep dive in our journey and legacy of creating our nonprofit and how we got to where we are today. And then I also consider myself a travelista. However, I have not had the opportunity to travel in the midst of COVID. And anyone that knows me know that it's very hard because typically every month I am in a different country, a different state, and I have not left Maryland since we have been in this COVID environment a year ago. So, building the right board, our topics for today, we're going to focus on identifying and selecting board members. What are the key elements to selecting your board members, the roles and responsibilities of the director and the board, and the engagement of your board? This is actually a picture of my founding board when we were in Okinawa, Japan. We were missing 2 individuals because they were back here in the US. So in order for me to really understand who I am talking to today, I really would like to know who is in the room, if you're a founder, if you're an executive director, or if you are a board of director. You can feel free to unmute yourself and just let us know who is in the room, and we can kind of go from there.
I'll unmute. This is Melanie. I am the founder of an organization. We're 2 years old, so we're still new.
Welcome, Melanie.
Hi, I'm Debbie Fowler. I'm the co-president of a chapter called Sleep in Heavenly Peace. We build beds for kids 3 to 17 who are in need.
And Debbie, you're here in Southern Maryland, correct?
Correct.
We
service St. Mary's County and Southern Calvert.
I think I remember you last year from the conference.
Yay!
Who else do we have in the room, if you're able to speak? I see Patty, that she is a founder of Pure Play. Me and Patty collaborate a lot together here in Southern Maryland, so definitely familiar with Patty Stein.
Hi, this is Shawan McGuire Ford. I'm actually a student. Hi, Caprice.
Hi, Shawan.
I'm a student at Texas A&M in the master's program of public administration and nonprofit management. And so I'm getting a second master's in nonprofit management. So I wanted to join this this webinar so that I can just get a little bit more information, because we're actually talking about boards this semester. So I felt like this would be a great opportunity for me to get a little bit more hands-on information from someone who's actually done it.
Okay, Thank you for joining us all the way from Texas.
You're welcome.
Anyone else want to share?
Hi, my name's Michelle. I am in the planning stages of creating a nonprofit.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. The board is the hardest part. Is when you're trying to start, even when you're in the midst of it. I think those that are here that are founders can definitely, they share their sentiment of how difficult it is. I think one of the first questions I saw in here is any tips on board recruiting? So we definitely will go into that. Anyone else want to share before we move on? Okay, well, thank you all for letting me know who you are, because that really helps me kind of tailor the status of this presentation, because it's very different for founders and executive directors, especially if you're the executive director and not the founder of the nonprofit. You may have been hired. So sometimes that journey of engaging with your board members is a little bit different. And then if you are the board chair or on the board, you know how to keep, you know, the committee going. So the framework for board members. So a common criticism for nonprofits is that board members are not engaged, they're not committed to the organization. And so this is really a symptom of a larger problem. Most times nonprofits have an inadequate board recruitment or training procedures. Many organizations do not have organized board meetings, which oftentimes can cause poor attendance. So how do we address this problem? We must begin with a framework in mind. So just listening to you, some of you are in your beginning stages, some are you at your 2 years, some maybe even further than that. But we need to focus on specific models of board leadership and how we address that. So a fundamental board, the concerns of the board, what is the role of the board's responsibility and of its members, and the board size. So today I'm really going to focus more on the board composition, diversity. Diversity is a huge one right now in society, and understanding the roles and the responsibilities as the founder and executive director, and then the roles and responsibilities of the board of directors. So the first question you should ask yourself before looking for board members is to identify what type of model of board leadership you're looking for. Is it a traditional board model, one that most of us has, and that consists of a committee structure reflecting areas of your organizational activity. Typically, it would also be an executive committee, your president, your vice president, secretary, treasurer, or a board that is really going to provide the governance. Or are you looking for an auxiliary or an advisory board where they oftentimes are not really providing the governance and the organizational structure, but more providing guidance on specific interests in the organization? So that's the first thing you really need to look at before identifying, how do I even recruit my board members? So where to find your board members? Really, board members are probably all around you. Sometimes you just need to ask your friends or those that are in your network. You can post on volunteer job boards. You can apply to board match organizations. One of my current board members, I actually received from Business Volunteers Maryland. And so there are several different board match organizations where companies will put their senior management and apply them to a board match organization, and then you as the nonprofit can apply to receive some of those individuals with particular expertise. So that goes to looking at the type of board members. What type of skill set do you want your board members to have? Should they match your values of your organization? What is the time commitment that you're looking for your board members? Some board members may be the founding board. The picture I showed you in the beginning was my founding board. All those board members are not still on my board, but they were very critical for me in the first 2 years of my founding of the organization. Then you want to look at, is this the working board and their time commitment? I will tell you now, my current board members, we're in year 5. This will be year 5 for Stella's Girls. And they are a working board. They're all assigned to committees. I have responsibilities that I have assigned to each of them. And they also are assigned to some of our volunteers with ensuring that we are providing the governance and the structure that we need for the board. Some of them is going to be a financial obligation. That's the biggest question I think I've seen here the last couple of months in some of our conversations in Southern Maryland. Do your board members have a financial obligation? I will tell you, my board members do. I require them to submit $500 yearly. So I don't care how they actually raise the funds, as long as they are actually contributing the $500 to the organization and to the mission. And then some board members, it's going to be what's in it for them. You know, there has to be something that's in it for them. And we'll definitely get more into that about the types of board members. And then the last thing for that role is the governance. If you're at that level of your nonprofit and the structure of needing a board that's going to provide more governance for you. So who do I know? How do I know who I need? And then how do I trust them? I think this is the next common question I hear from my peers and just clients is, how do I create trust in my board? And how do I understand their motive? So we're going to dive a little bit into altruism. Altruism means caring for the welfare of others, our state of being another human, and to acknowledge altruism. Effective leadership integrates altruism and authority. So who and what type of people do you want serving on your board? So there are 4 combinations of individuals that typically serve on a board. The first board member would be those individuals that are marginals. Typically, they possess low altruism and low authority. So these individuals may not know or have an understanding of concerns for others. So oftentimes they're very self-serving individuals, and they do sometimes lack the sense of connection with your clients or with the public that you're serving. Why would you select a person that may be of a marginal mindset? Because they may represent a constituency that you're interested in serving in or that your nonprofit is serving in. They may have access to or possess wealth. We all need money in a nonprofit to continue to serve. And sometimes it's more of having the individual's name that's tied to the board. It also will bring resources. They also may be valuable in contributions to specific areas. Typically, though, this type of person, their primary motivation is social connections. They usually will join a board more to engage in the social aspect, to gain more clients, to gain more visibility. Now, too many of these board members that are marginals can also bring damage to the organization. It also can become a very self-serving, where they're meeting the needs of the group, of the board, instead of the needs of the mission. And I think we all know so many boards that have gotten in trouble because they have been embezzlement with the boards instead of actually serving the public. So you really want to be careful about who you have on your boards and how many of them actually fit into this marginal category. The second type is the resume builders. So they usually are low altruism and high authority. In spite of their belief that service to others is something good to do, their primary motivation is to do well rather than to do good. So their interest typically lies with developing more contacts and skills through voluntary service. These individuals possess a high level of competence and responsibility at an institutional level. So they are identified and valued for their specific skills and abilities that they can contribute to the organization, and oftentimes are given board responsibilities where their abilities can be used. So this individual that is a resume builder, they really can contribute to the specific skills of your nonprofit. So if you're in the beginning stage of your nonprofit, you want to make sure you have someone that is knowledgeable about taxes. You want to make sure that you have someone that is knowledgeable about legal and ethics on your board, someone that's knowledgeable in communication and marketing. And then you want someone that is really knowledgeable about the subject matter that your organization mission is focused on. Those are the key people of really looking for board members and skill sets, especially at your beginning. And I think many founders find themselves in just asking a friend, and then it's like, well, now my friends that are on my board really aren't doing the work. So we have to be really more strategic as founders and even as executive directors in the beginning and in our growth stage about the skill set of our board of directors. So now with the resume builders, Their primary motivation oftentimes is leadership visibility. So these individuals may sit on multiple boards and they may not have the time commitment to really dedicate to your organization, especially if you're in the beginning. And with your resume builder, sometimes they're going to challenge their workplace competence over the workplace competence of a board. So just because you are a chief operating officer in a for-profit doesn't mean that you're going to completely understand the operations of a nonprofit. Many times business professionals like to come to nonprofits and tell nonprofits what they're doing wrong, when actually sometimes a nonprofit operates completely different than that business. Now, nonprofits are business. Let's not miss that misconception. I think a lot of time individuals don't consider nonprofits a business. They're always asking, they're saying, well, how do you make money? Nonprofits can't keep money. Well, if we don't have money, we can't continue to serve our population. So you definitely want to make sure that you educate those individuals that are resume builders. Your third group is going to be your compassionates. So these are your volunteers who are especially knowledgeable about the needs of whom the organization directly serves. Their primary focus is going to be serving the public. Their self-service bias may often be a desire to address the client's needs immediately and to engage in immediate direct action to alleviate identified problems. So your compassionates are definitely committed to the development and effectiveness of your programs, but they also may not be focusing on the what's after the now. So many nonprofits, I think, falter in that first 5 years because they've only focused on, well, I wanted to address this issue. But once you address that issue, how do you continue to sustain? So individuals that are compassionate oftentimes will only focus on the current needs of the organization. But why would you have compassionate? Because they're going to make sure that you're accountable to your mission. They have the ability to influence others in the issues that you are focusing on. And these individuals will provide hands-on assistance. So anytime you have a compassionate serving on your board, most of the times they're going to show up to every event. They're going to help from the beginning to the end. So you definitely still need these compassionate individuals. But you also have to be careful that these individuals can contribute to overextending the organization. So whereas an organization, let's say here, I'm gonna just pick up Patty for a second. She probably always gets picked on, but for Pure Play, the focus of making sure children play. And if some of her board members that are like, oh, well, we should definitely extend, Pure Play all the way to Prince George's County and then to Anne Arundel County, because we all know how essential it is for play. But if Patty doesn't have a team of volunteers and effect board members that are going to always follow her, then her organization will become overextended and she won't be able to really meet her mission in those other counties. So those are the things you have to definitely be careful about when having compassionates on your board. So now let's talk about the trustee leaders. So trustee leaders, these are individuals that seek to achieve the balance between the needs of the individual and those of the organization. And they're going to exercise their responsibilities with genuine care and ensuring that you are accountable not only to your mission and the organizational structure, but also to the clients that you're serving. So these individuals, they have self-interest and a balance with their sensitivity. They have a deep understanding of what their own individual history and mission they can bring to the organization. So they're going to provide you with very critical, but very also understanding information that's going to help your organization grow. They can express their caring in a powerful and empowering way to affect change. So not only are they focusing on the individual that you're servicing now, they're also going to focus on the self-development of the board and how the board is trained, and on the organizational assessment of the organization. So this person may ask that you attend more conferences like we all are attending now, and maybe getting together and building out your strategic plan, maybe building out your marketing plan. But these individuals also have the ability to anticipate and project a future of what is necessary to survive and sustain. So one of the biggest issues of smaller nonprofits is the sustainability. This individual with their skill set is going to help you be able to look at how do you continue to sustain past your 5, 10, 15, 20-year mark. So they're also going to know their strengths and their limits, and they will let you know and they will establish the boundaries of service. So I gave you four types of people that make up the board. So there are valid reasons to have board members who operate in the marginal, in your resume builders, and your compassionate categories. But what is important for you as a founder, you as an executive director, or you as a board chair is to identify whether your organization has the vision, the capacity, and the commitment to invest in the depth education to develop a trustee leader. And what that means is you want board of directors or board members that are intentional and they make an effort and a method to make a normative behavior to develop governance in your organization that will foster leadership in the community. It will create trust in your community, and it will create trust within your nonprofit. So having a balanced board, you want your board members to have a diversity of perspective. You want them to have a diversity of skills, their abilities. You want a balance of all four types of individuals that I just gave to you. Both have passion, they both have competencies, but the biggest focus and goal that you want to keep in mind is, what is my mission of my organization? What is the vision that I see? What capacity do I currently have, especially when you're building out your strategic plan? What is my capacity for the next 5 to 10 years? Or if you need to break it down smaller, what is my capacity for the next 2 years? And then what is the commitment and level that I need for my board members to invest in me as the founder or executive director, or to invest in the organization? So I want to take a moment and stop there and just kind of see who makes up your current board and where you're struggling, if anyone wants to share. And then if there are any questions. Okay, I see a question. There's a question. Go ahead. Someone.
I was going to say, we do have a few questions in the chat.
Okay.
In the Q&A.
I do see the one about an assessment to develop to determine if you have a balanced board. At the end, I will share several resources. I started to provide you all with an assessment, but there are so many different assessments of board members. One of the ones, my favorite go-tos, if you're in Maryland, is Maryland Nonprofits. They have great assessments on seeing if you have a balanced board. You also can go to Board Source. They're another great tool. Nonprofit Ready, that's one that actually has training segments, but you really can go through and look at their training and actually send those training to your board members to really identify if you have a balanced board. Someone wanted to share?
I'd like to get your thoughts, or the group's collective thoughts. At our board, I'm at the St. Mary's County Historical Society, the executive director. Our board, sharing very much of what you described in terms of compassion and interest in the subject area and capability. Our board members are also tasked with participating in, if not chairing, specific committees, programs, marketing, so on. And I guess the question that I have is, how does that fit in your and the experience of others in your assessment of identifying prospective board members? Our board members are by and large aging, and so as we go out and look at the county, or people who, if not live in the county, have a history in the county, may live over in Virginia or in Charles County or Colbert County. It's very important to us that we get all of the qualities that you described, but also a knowledge base within that subject area. And that tends for us to limit our field of view of potential board members. So I'm wondering what your experiences are with, or those of others might be in that respect, and what I can learn.
Anybody wants to share their experience before I dive into that? Well, Peter, what I'll tell you, and I'll go into a little bit more in the presentation too about identifying those members with those skill sets, is sometimes you really have to look outside the box. So as a heritage, you may really want to look at your colleges that are your individuals that are engaged into history and learning about heritage. You'll be very shocked at how many young people are really into the heritage and understanding of heritage. I mean, not only college students, but even students that are younger than that. So sometimes it really takes you as the founder or you as the executive director to also train, because maybe they may not have that actual skill set of knowing the knowledge about the history of your organization and what the mission is, but they may have a skill set and desire to learn and want to do more. So as a founder or executive director, it's your responsibility to train, because we're not going to have the perfect board member that comes to our organization unless they have kind of been in it with you the entire time. But you really do have to implement a training program so they can understand. I'll tell you, when we were stationed in Frederick County about 10 years ago, I used to be the board chair for social services. I was the youngest chair in the state of Maryland. I think at that time I was 25 years old. I didn't have a whole lot of experience and knowledge about social services, but I had the desire to ensure that our families and the youth were receiving their resources. So every time we had a board meeting, the senior staff and the executive director would come in and actually provide reports. And so that's how I really learned the interworkings of the organization, is having the senior management come and tell me what they're working on and also what their needs were. But then also making sure that I attended all the conferences that were being held in the state that focused on social services. So that's one way to do it. If you have staff, the staff are a very critical part in really help educating your board. Some board members are very hands-off and they're not really engaged in the day-to-day, which is okay. And oftentimes, especially in some of our smaller organizations, your board members may want to know and be engaged with your volunteers so they can understand what they're doing and what their need is. Any other questions or comments on who makes up your current board?
Forgive me if we already talked about it, but we use a board matrix in Excel to track the different skills and aspects of diversity that we need on our board. We look for expertise in areas where we have those committees, as the last person mentioned, but in other areas that we identify within our strategic plan as areas where we need board support. We also feel it's unethical for us to have a board that doesn't represent the community that we serve. So we actively track aspects of diversity like race and sexual preferences.
Mm-hmm. And Connor, you're with the Maryland of Nonprofits?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, probably right before you came on too, that was one of the questions, is the assessments and where to get them. And I did mention Maryland Nonprofits has some great assessments to help the founders and executive directors really assess their board. Is that matrix also in one of those assessments too?
Yeah, we have a sample. It's a member benefit, but folks are welcome to contact me and we can help you out.
So just once again, if you aren't a member of Maryland Nonprofits, I'm not a member of their board or anything. It's just they really are a great tool here for us in Maryland to really utilize and not try to reinvent the wheel. All of these assessments and things are out there, so don't try to recreate one where there are some that are out there that are working really well. So the next one, there was a question in the question and answer about how do I get past bias when trying to create a diverse board for a nonprofit centered on racial equality. So I wanted to dig in a little bit about diversity and inclusion recruitment tips. One of the first things we really need to look at, how are we defining diversity and inclusion? So I gave a definition here on diversity. So diversity focuses on underrepresented groups with regard to race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and other visible and non-visible characteristics. Diversity is also often interchangeably with representation, i.e. the extent to which participants in the organization reflects its constituents. So one of the very first things I think when we talk about bias and diversity and equity and inclusion is beginning with your own understanding and your team's understanding of implicit and unconscious bias. One of the best tools I've found out there is Project Implicit. And so, and this is put on by Harvard. And so there's the link there. If you download the package, you get the link for this assessment. But this assessment allows you to go through each diversity verbiage and really identify what biases you or your team may have and how that's affecting you and your organization. Another recruitment tip would be to look for candidates with a variety of professional expertise, cultural backgrounds, spectrum of life experiences, and geographical reach. And so those assessments that we were talking about in the matrix that Connor had just mentioned, that's something really good to be able to use and say, well, what is it that we need? Who are the constituents that we're serving? And does our board actually reflect that? And sometimes as a leader in a nonprofit, you need to be intentional about this. And I think that's where many nonprofits struggle. Is they're like, okay, well, I know I need diversity, but how and where do I find them? You know, how do I make sure that I'm not having a bias against these board members? Once again, you see this assessment. You need to conduct that organizational assessment. Does your board make up at least 30 to 50% of the representation of the clients you serve? You really want to make sure that your board is a representation of your clients, because that's really going to help you address the needs of that community. Sometimes, and particularly in what research has shown, is most boards are made up of white men. It's always how it's been white men. However, it is changing. And so I will tell you, as a nonprofit leader in the international space, when I go into the international countries that I work in, oftentimes I'm on the ground, and a lot of the youth that I'm serving across Africa, they don't always see a lot of Black Americans. They see white Americans coming and doing mission and serving them. And so when you look at what benefit we have to them, you have to have a balance of Black and white Americans and that skill set. But one thing that I experienced first going into Africa was the expectation of me always going to give them funding, because when you have those white Americans that have had the financial resources that I myself may not have had, the kids automatically expected me to provide them with those resources. And so sometimes having that very diverse board will help you really change the mindset too of how you're serving the constituents on the ground. So also evaluate your board's culture. Is your organization and your board even welcoming to individuals of diverse backgrounds? So if your organization isn't very welcoming to diverse individuals, more than likely, you're not going to be able to attract diverse individuals to come to your organization and serve on your board. So you really need to identify, is the culture of your organization very welcoming? Do you actually participate in other organizations, other celebrations of focusing on international cultures, or even it may be just what you're serving on the ground? Does your client base actually serve a very diverse group of people, or is it only focused on particular individuals in your community?
Excuse me, Caprice?
Yes.
We have someone who raised their hand. Daryl Johnson has a question.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Daryl.
Hey, can you guys see me?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I'm on my lunch break. I'm a high school teacher, so I stepped out just for this part. So I love your explanation and your answer to the question. I greatly appreciate it. To be more defined with it though, I'm actually the founder of what I call The Path. And it's all about reconciling us as people in order to deal with racial injustice. So what I'm talking about is I've solicited for people for my board of all different races, because we can't reconcile without it being diversity on the board. Yet when they see a Black founder and other African Americans on the board, I think there's some type of confirmational bias about what the intent is. Although our website, all of the promotional videos we've created, everything speaks about this unity. Even our first promo video is me sitting down with a couple of my friends who are not African American, and we are talking about real issues in society. So I'm just trying to figure out what else can I do, because everything we present is, look, we want everyone at this table. We don't want it to be a all Black board talking about racial injustice because there needs to be other seats at the table.
Yeah, no, Daryl, I totally agree. I will tell you, even though for my nonprofit is not specifically focused on racial equality, a lot of my work I have done has been across Africa. So when you go on my page, you're going to see mostly Black African children. You may see some Hispanic children, but I've also kept it very open. My board is very diverse. I have a very diverse board. So I think sometimes, and particularly as African-American nonprofit founders or executive directors, is we have to be able to have that open discussion one-on-one. What I've come across sometimes is when we're looking for non-people of color, sometimes they also may feel like there may be a bias against them, or that may be ulterior motives to come into that organization. Now, when we were in California right before here, there was a group, Whites for Racial Equality. So finding groups like that may be a great place for you to go and look for boards, go and look for board members. So we also have to be intentional about where we go and look for people, because not every person is going to want to deal with racial equality issues, because it is a very touchy subject for different people. And you're in Atlanta, and I used to live in Georgia, I lived in Savannah, and I know the dynamic and understand some of the conversations and things that individuals in Georgia deal with. So you yourself may need to be more intentional about what organizations you're going to recruit those board members that you seek. Because even just putting the information out there, it still can be intimidating for a white person that may want to come and join, because they also want to be careful about the information that they're putting out, or also setting up themselves to be a target if there is a particular target. Because a lot of times there is. A lot of white people I feel are targeted against when they are actually trying to speak out against racial equality. But that's not always the same across the board. But I would just be more intentional about who you're looking for.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. For the diversity inclusion, this goes back to kind of what Daryl's talking about, is how do we find people? Because that's the thing, it's okay, well, where do we look? Oh my gosh, you look everywhere. I'll tell you, for African Americans, you can look at the Divine Nine Greek lettered organizations. So these are your sororities and your fraternities. These individuals are college educated individuals. They are already willing to serve their local community. So team up with one of them in the local organization. In your local community. Your Masonic organizations, so your Eastern Stars, your Masons, your Shriners, these are also individuals that are definitely dedicated to the community. The churches are a great place to look for African Americans, your university alumni associations, civic organizations like the NAACP, you have the Rainbow Coalition, and you can look at your minority chambers. These are places where you can post and say, I'm looking for board members, and this is the type of skill set that I'm looking for. This is a very intentional action as a board chair, as an executive director, and as a founder. For your Hispanic and Latinx community, Catholic churches, Voto Latino, Unidos US, and Latino chambers. The LGBTQ plus community, oh my gosh, you can just put in Google different groups and they'll all come up. You can look at look at the alliances, you can look at the GLAAD chapters that are across the US. So it's very easy, actually easier to find members of the LGBTQ plus community than anybody else. Women, you go to mom groups, you can look at your PTAs, your PTOs, you can look at your professional women business leagues. Individuals with disabilities, you can look at the Commission on Disabilities, you can look at some of the schools that service individuals with disabilities, some of the different centers, immigrants or refugees, the UN committees, the local embassies, especially if you're local here in the DMV area, and just looking at international organizations. One group I did leave off, and that's military, looking at the VFWs, the armed forces groups, any military support organization, you're gonna find individuals for military, whether it be veteran or military spouses that are also looking to serve. So these are just a few places that you can look to ensure that you're intentional about your recruitment efforts. So let's talk about sustainability and governance. So who is actually responsible for what on a nonprofit board and in the nonprofit organization? So if you yourself here are a founder or an executive director, you are responsible for identifying and building the framework of what you want your board to be and for it to be set up as. You need to provide them with the mission, the vision, the objectives of your organization. Financial documents should be open and they should have access to your financial documents. Same for your governing documents. Do you have a code of ethics? Do you have your constitution and bylaws? Do you have policies and procedures? And do you have job descriptions that your board members are going to be able to look at and understand the makeup of your organization? It's your responsibility, oftentimes, particularly if you're the founder, to recruit and train your board members. You can bring on a board, but if you do not train them in what you need them to do and to provide them resources, they're not going to know how to help serve you. And engaging your team, making sure that you're communicating with them, that you're socializing with them, that you're asking them and telling them that you need help from them. Because you have several board members that really want to help, but they don't know how to help. They said yes or signed up, or they may have said no because they really don't understand what it is required of them. So that is, as the founder or executive director, you really need to be very, very open and provide guidance on what you need for them. So now for the board, what is your board of directors' responsibility? So determining your mission and purpose. Yes, I said as a founder, as executive director, that is your job, but it is also your board of directors' job to assure and do an organizational assessment that you are still meeting your mission and purpose. Many nonprofits change their mission statement years, I would say 5, 10, 15, 20 years. The American Red Cross is a perfect one. They've been around now for 130 years, and their mission statement has changed over the course of the years, and it's changed 3 times. The board of directors are responsible for selecting an executive director. Now, if you're a founder, oftentimes as the founder, you're going to be the chief executive officer, or you may decide to be the president of your board. But the board of directors are responsible for assessing your performance as an executive director. They're responsible of looking and knowing, understanding the legal and ethical integrity of your organization. They're responsible for your financial oversight. You want to make sure that you have the adequate resources to serve your community. Organizational planning. Do you have a strategic plan, a marketing and communication plan? Is there a fundraising plan in action? So I think Peter was saying how they have committees like most traditional boards. These are the functions of your boards, and oftentimes your board members are going to be chairs of those committees. What is the public standing of the organization? So they are your front face. So not only should it be the executive director or the founder, your board member should also be a walking billboard for your organization. They're responsible for recruitment and orientation of your new board members, your regular assessments of the organization. You all have seen this word over and over and over again. The assessment of your nonprofit is so critical and so important from the very startup phase all the way until you are at your 20, 30, 40, 100-year mark of being in a nonprofit. And providing support, whether that's your financial support, whether it's just support for the CEO and founder, it's support for the board members, support for the staff, but they are also responsible for providing support for your nonprofit.
Caprice, we have a question,
Yes.
couple questions, but they're related to what you were just discussing. How often should these assessments be conducted?
So typically assessments, so let's say if you have a strategic plan, most plans are looked at 2 to 5 years, or it may be 2 to 3 years. It really depends on the growth stage or the life cycle of your nonprofit. So if you were at the founding stage, what I did for my nonprofit, I built out a strategic plan for 5 years. But every other year, I'm still looking at the assessment of my nonprofit to ensure that I'm staying on track with my strategic plan and that any of my new board members coming on, that they meet the needs that I require them to meet. But I also make sure that they do assessments to ensure that we're meeting that need every 1 to 2 years. So it really just depends on your growth stage. But I would say at least every 2 years, you really want to look and see where your organization is and how you're really meeting the needs of the public that you're trying to serve.
Thank you. The next question was about the board recruiting. It was from Melanie Oates. She said, my board tenure expires this year. What was the transition like when your founding board exited, as in feeling? How did you feel? What was it a nervous, exciting experience? Curious, since that is what we will go through this year.
Okay, that's exciting, Melanie. I would say, so I kind of staggered my board and ensuring that all of my founding board members did not leave at the same time. What I did is really, I asked them if they were ready to commit another 2 to 3 years. My board members stay on for 3 years. Most organizations do 2. I always suggest you really shouldn't have a board member stay more than 2 to 3 years. But it was an exciting thing. I asked them if they wanted to stay or if they wanted to serve in a different capacity. I would say, and particularly for your organization, you may want to look at your founding board and then move to an advisory role and creating the advisory boards. So they're going to be those board members that are providing specific guidance to the population that you're serving. So they don't actually exit completely out of the organization, but they're still providing some valuable input for you and the board that is currently serving as your governing board. So does that kind of that answer?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions in there, Melissa or Joyce? I'm not sure which one of you were.
No, that's all of them. Thank you.
Okay. The engagement. So this is the most critical piece for as the nonprofit founder, as the executive director, as the board chair. Get your board of directors involved. I have watched so many nonprofits fail at their board because they did not get them involved. They didn't invite them to the events. They never told them about fundraisers. They didn't have them assigned to a committee. So if you just say, okay, I want you to be on my board, but you don't provide them with any opportunity to be engaged, then of course, they're not going to be around. They're not going to be able to provide their guidance, and they're going to feel like they are a body. Oftentimes, most people do not know what they're supposed to do while serving on a board. That's just the reality of it. Okay, I'm on this board, but what do I do? What do you need me to do? And so that's why it's so important to have those governing documents and have those position descriptions. They need to know and understand their role. So ensuring that they are receiving the training, receiving resources. This conference is a perfect example of making sure that board members have access to this. If your board members were not able to join, I think all these sessions are being recorded. You can send this to them and say, okay, this is how we really engage you as a board member. Ensure that their voice is heard. You don't want a board member that's sitting on your board and they never say anything. Like absolutely say nothing. So you really want to make sure they are saying something and they have some type of input, because when they know that their voice is valued and you really trust them, they're going to provide you that critical information that you need. That's the one thing I love about my board members. And I will tell you all, my board members are not here in Maryland. We are spread out all across the US. And this is the first time in 5 years we've all actually been in the US. Typically, we've all been in 3 different countries, just because I have a lot of military spouses on my board as well. But, you know, having their voice and knowing, they're like, oh, nope, Caprice, we're stressing ourselves too far. We need to go in this direction. I appreciate that from them, and they know that I value their input and what they have to say to ensure that we're not stretching out our resources. Make sure your board meetings are productive. You know, sometimes it means having a report, staying within 2 hours and not going over that 2 hours, but it really needs to be a very productive meeting for the board. That's the worst thing for anybody, to come to a meeting and it's not productive. You're not really well put together. They don't know what's going on with the organization. So oftentimes that's going to lead to poor attendance, and then particularly just dropping off of your board. You want to make sure that you communicate with them. That's within the board meetings, outside of the board meetings. You want to make sure that your board members know what's really going on and how they really can help you and your staff or your volunteers in the organization. And then the other thing is socialize and network. You really should get to know who your board members are, especially if they're not close friends or just in your network. understand why they joined the board, why they are interested in serving in a capacity as a board member, but be able to socialize and just have fun. Do happy hour. A happy hour with the executive director, with, our founder for your board. Happy hour can be whatever drink of choice that you may want to have, but do a happy hour, do a lunch date. Even in this virtual space, you still can keep your board very engaged in social activities. So make sure that you are socializing with your board and networking with the board. This is good. We're close to our time. Yes.
So we do have a question in the chat. You had mentioned board members not serving for more than 3 years. The question is, why not have a board member serve for more than 3 years if the member is still enthusiastic and contributes?
I wouldn't say that. There are some times that you do have that board member that will stay longer than all. It's not a best practice to have board members stay 5, 10, 15 years. And this is just as your whole board, because how are you getting new perspectives and new ideas if the same person is staying on the board, or the same people are staying on the board and your board doesn't change? Because after sometimes board members being on there becomes stale. The stalemate. So we have these organizations that have been around 15, 20 years, and they still trying to understand why their organization hasn't moved in the last 5 or 10 years. Oftentimes it's, people are speaking the same language on the board and they don't have any new perspectives or new ideas that are coming on the board. So I'm not saying that they can't, because I do know organizations where you have those emeritus board members that have been on there 15, 20 years, but you don't want your whole board to stay on for 3 or more years, because you're not going to get those fresh ideas and fresh perspectives for your organization, and really ensuring that you have the evaluation, especially if that board member may be, let's say if they're one of the compassionates that I was talking about, but they're not showing of the assessments are happening for the board. So you definitely don't want to have your organization be ineffective with having a person like that continuously. I saw a hand somewhere.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Oh, great. And I've heard some different perspectives on this. If you have family members, extended or immediate family members who will work well with your initiatives and being board members, is there a really true set guideline as to how many family members you can have on your board?
I think it depends on, so that is always, because I think the question that comes up sometimes is the ethical thing of having your family members on your board. However, it really depends on the type of organization you are running. Say specifically if it was a family trust. Your family trust, more than likely all your board members are going to be family members only. You're not really going to invite outside people, and these are still nonprofits. However, I would say just being careful and ensuring that you have code of ethics and your legal and ethics documentation for family members, and ensuring that the family member isn't serving in a conflicting position. So let's say if it's the family member is the president and the treasurer. Prime example, I think me and my husband were serving in an organization and someone wanted me to be the treasurer and he was the president. And I was like, absolutely not, because that means the people that oversee the money are in the same household. So you definitely want to make sure that they aren't serving in positions that can really conflict with each other. Is that helpful, Coggins? I can't. So.
Yes, so you can have as many family members as you want, I guess, but just as long as things are all copacetic as far as the appearance and how it's operating.
Yeah, because I would say yes, but I would also say to just look at the type of boards, because all of our nonprofits are categorized differently, and there may be specific laws on the type of nonprofit, because not everyone is a 501c3. Some it may be a 501c6, a 501c4, a 501c7. So you really want to make sure that you're looking at the type and what the legalities are around that.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Peter, I see your hand.
Yeah, I have a question. While they offer a software program, and that's not my interest, I wonder whether any you or any of your the folks on the session have had any interaction with Boardable. It's a organization that provides some software specifically for nonprofits. But they have a very, to me, it seems, very rich resource library on a host of topics. And I've perused a few of them, wondering what other folks' reactions or impressions of them might be.
So you were talking about Boardable, right, Peter? Is that Boardable? I think I'm familiar with that. I've never utilized them. Has anyone else in the group ever utilized Boardable before?
Yeah, from what I see, they tend to have a lot of free resources, and the one or two that I have taken a look at seem to be well organized and thoughtful. So I share that with you I was interested in other views, but if they haven't used them, then that's fine.
Okay. Well, yeah, so I would say add that to this resources for boards, as I mentioned. Well, Nonprofit Institute, that's where, I mean, we all are here today with a Nonprofit Institute. Business volunteers, Maryland, this is where I was talking about where you can be matched up with business professionals that are looking to serve on boards. I definitely, my strategic planning chair for my board actually came from General Electric in Baltimore, and I received her because I applied for the business volunteers. Maryland Nonprofits, Charity Navigator, Board Source, the Council of Nonprofits, and then Nonprofit Ready are just going to be some more of your resources for you as the founder and executive director and as the board of directors. How to get in touch with me? You can find me on capricejames.com. You can find me at stellasgirls.org. My office number, it's there, and then the email addresses as well. Any other further questions that we can answer? Patty?
Yeah, the one resource that you were talking about, yeah, thank you, Caprice. I appreciate that. One more back.
One more back. Yes.
Business Volunteers Maryland, how, in your experience, how long does it typically take for them to respond to you? I submitted an application a while ago and I haven't heard back yet.
No, haven't heard back. I think we've talked about this, and actually they emailed me this morning. So, I mean, when I applied back over the summertime, I think I heard back from them 2 weeks. However, I do know that they are updating their system. So that's the email I received this morning, that they were updating their system because their system wasn't very effective. So I would say what I'll do is I will forward the email to you who emailed me today, so that you will get that information. But it is a very good organization to connect with.
Thank you.
Did we miss any other questions?
Could you take us back to your contact information?
Yes.
There are no further questions in the Whova app.
Yeah, I'm trying to see. Sometimes prefer the majority of the board, not. Yeah, but some of the answers about the related board members. So I said it's definitely important to make sure you look at the IRS definition for boards, because it really depends on the types of nonprofits that you have. So, well, that is all. We're at our time, I believe, as well, right? It was 12:30. I hope that this was helpful for you. Definitely reach out. So a lot of the information, particularly the four types of boards. So in full disclosure, I actually did research and studying for my doctorate in board development and governance. And so boards are very important to me in making sure that, board members have the resources that they need. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out. I think that our nonprofits, we can do so much more. We have more hands and have the people, but we have to be the ones that train them. And so if we don't take the time and intention to really train those board members, then they're not going to be effective for us. Patty, I see your hand.
One last question. Do you do any board consultation? Like, would you go to a board retreat and participate and lead them through an assessment or anything of that nature?
I do. And I would say, so the capricejames.com, that is for my consulting business. Yeah, I will help you with your strategic plan. I will help you looking at board assessments. I do provide those services to nonprofits.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions, comments?
This is Melanie. Where can we find the link to the presentation?
I think, so if you're in the Hoover app, you'll scroll all the way down, I think right after the description, and it says handouts. And it should say building the right board, but it also should be in the documents section of the conference. It should be listed there as well.
That's correct.
And if you don't find it, Melanie, I'll make sure that I send it to you. I think I still have your contact too. Well, I thank you all for, taking this hour and 15 minutes to talk about boards. Definitely make sure you don't forget to fill out the survey. Let me know if there's more information. I really try to take it easy. Board directors, that's a whole day conversation. That's a whole training. So to really combine it, compact it into an hour, I really try to focus more on the roles and responsibilities and that recruitment piece. And especially those are things I've been hearing, particularly in Southern Maryland the last couple of months, of how do we find board members? What help do we need? So I hope this was helpful for some of you all.
Caprice, if we put our email in the chat, or how do we make sure we get a copy of your presentation?
You can put your email in the chat. I can definitely make sure that I email it out.
Great. And do you ever do train the trainers for organizations that maybe want to continually be working on training over, in addition to a board retreat, but do you ever train the trainers for folks that are managing boards?
I have not. I used to do that when I was a resiliency program manager. I usually train the trainers, but we definitely can talk about that, Mari.
Okay, I'll reach out.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions? But yeah, if anybody does not see the document, definitely put your email in the chat, and I'll I will email it out directly to you right after this session. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I look forward to seeing the rest of you in the rest of the conference.